Okay. I'm so glad all of you are here. It's a pleasure for me to have you here. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start out with both sides of my family came from overseas, so I'm going to start with my granddad Baker. That was my mother's dad, and he was born May the 18th in 1868, and he was born on the day that our son-in-law was born. And in Russia, after the death of Catherine the Tsar of Russia, first of all, let me share with you that in 1744, Peter III of Russia and Catherine II of Germany got married. And Peter was a weak-minded and irresponsible person. And his reign was of short duration because Catherine II started a revolution and he got killed. And so she declared herself the ruler of Germany after he died. And when she was brilliant and an intelligent person, but she was very cruel. But she had an idea that if she could get the German people to move to Russia, they would farm and show the Russian people how to farm. And she knew they were industrious because she herself was a German. And we've been to Germany, and they are very clean and industrious and everything. Anyway, when she was sure that her rule was definite and that she could be the ruler of Russia, she told them that if they'd moved to Russia, they wouldn't have to serve in the military for 100 years, and that they'd have no taxation for 30 years, and they could have religious freedom, and each village could have their own government, and it was free. All they had to do was abide by the civil law of Russia. And so, and she also told the immigrants if they didn't have money to build a house, that they would loan them the money interest-free. And when they got there, she forgot all about this. And so she didn't do that. But anyway, my granddad Baker, when he turned 21, he was going to have to go into the military, the Russian army. And he didn't want to go into the Russian army. And so he and two of his friends swam a river at night and went across the river, and they caught a bus to the train station, and then they went and got on a ship and came to America. And they ended up in Kansas, Lehigh, Kansas. And he had some cousins that lived there, and he worked with them. He was a little over 20 years old when all this happened. And he left his father and mother and one brother, William, and some nieces and nephews in Russia, and he left. When he left, he knew that he'd probably never see them again. And I can't even imagine that, can you? And anyway, he told them goodbye, and he felt real bad about leaving, but he didn't want to go into the Russian army. And so he told them bye. And I think the reason that there were nieces and nephews living there, William, his first wife died, his brother's wife died, and so probably they all lived in the same house, and the grandmother probably took care of the kids. Anyway, they swam across the river and came to America, and he worked in any job that he could get. And when he was 28 years old, he met my grandmother, and she was living in Kansas, and she was 18, and they got married. He was 28 and she was 18. So there was quite an age difference, wasn't there? Anyway, they had 7 girls, all girls, no boys. And each girl was, well, one of them was a seamstress, one was a cook, one was, each one of them had a talent, and they did it. And Mother said her mother just sat on the couch and just looked pretty. Anyway, that was a good trick if you could do it, I guess. But anyway, my mother was her daddy's boy, and she helped him outside and helped with she had a team of horses that she had her own team of horses that she worked with. Anyway, she enjoyed being outside and loved her daddy. He must have been a great, kind man. And he was a good farmer and a good provider for those girls. And when he was older, he wasn't very old when he died. He was just 56. But he had diabetes, and he took sick, and the daughter that sewed, he bought all the black material, and she made all the girls, all 6 of them. The oldest girl died in childbirth, so she wasn't around, but all 6 of them, he got material, and she made dresses for him, and they all tried them on and showed them to him, and he was very pleased with all the dresses that he had made, that he had gotten for the girls. And he always wanted his girls to look good, and the grandmother always did. She'd sit on the couch and she looked good. Oh, that's funny. Anyway, her folks had somebody else in mind for her to marry other than my granddad, but she did not marry them, and so she married my granddad. And I think they didn't forgive her for this for 2 years. When their baby was 2 years old, they went to see him and said they were real surprised because they were happy and seemed like they were getting along pretty good. And so they talked him into moving to Marion, Kansas, where closer to them. And so he moved the family to Marion, Kansas, and they worked there for a while. But anyway, that's where my granddad met my grandmother, and so that was on Mother's side of the family. And also, you see, Carolyn, I think, was going to show us a picture. This is Peter Ehrlich. Oh, there, yeah. This is we have an old, they did a history of my family from 1763 to 1970, I think it was. And that is a church, the Lutheran church they went to in Russia. And it was quite a church, you can see. And the thing is, Peter Ehrlich is a real Jewish name, but he wasn't really an Ehrlich. His folks died in, they called it the plague in Russia, and the bubonic plague was real prevalent in those days. And probably he had the bubonic plague, and a Jewish family adopted him, so he got the name Ehrlich. And that's his wife and the church they went to in Russia. They eventually came to America, but we can't claim to be Jewish because we're not. It'd be nice, but it wouldn't. Anyway, okay, Carolyn, this is Johann and Christine Renner. This is my other great-grandparents. And Johann and Christine were my mother's my dad's, grandparents. And when my daddy was born in Eggenfeld, Russia, in 1900, and this is right here's Eggenfeld, and this is a village. When we went to Minsk, Belarus, I stayed with a couple that they had lived in this village before they moved to Minsk, which is quite a ways. And we were in the village there, and I stayed with them, and they knew exactly the village where my daddy was born because they lived 25 kilometers from there. And she was telling me all about it, and that was quite a God thing to me. I just thought that was really neat that I stayed with somebody that had been there, you know. And anyway, they had 8 children, and they were planning to come to America before Daddy's mother died in childbirth. And they had 8 children, and this was the 9th child that they had, and she died. And so this is the great-grandparents, and they're my grandparents, yeah. And they brought my dad to America, and they chose Molly, one of his sisters, because she stayed with the grandparents and helped the grandmother a lot. And they decided to bring one of the boys so she wouldn't be lonely. So they brought 5-year-old Rudolph with them, and that was my dad.
Okay, I want to show something. Okay, so this is confusing a little bit. So I'm going to help, right?
Okay.
Get this.
Okay.
Okay, so Christine is one of the daughters, and she married Jacob, and then their last child, she died, and the baby died. Mm-hmm. So that left Jacob with all these children, okay? And so Molly was the youngest little girl, and she stayed a lot with her grandparents. And so the grandparents up there, whatever their names are, Johann and Christine, they were going to immigrate, but Jacob stayed with his family, but they took the 2 youngest grandchildren and adopted them. Mm-hmm. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, they had to adopt them because if they hadn't, they'd have been accused of kidnapping on the trip over, so they had to change their name to Renner. And they came in with their 8 children. They had the 2 grandchildren, and so that's how they all came to America. And Dad and my Aunt Molly left behind 4 older brothers and 2 older sisters, and their dad. And he was really brokenhearted when they left. You can imagine letting your little child go. And anyway, they did well until they got to Bremen, Germany, and they checked them physically, and my dad didn't pass the test because he had something wrong with his eyes. They said he had a disease of his eyes, and I don't know for sure what that was, but they wouldn't let him on the ship. And so he was in Germany, and the grandmother stayed there with him, and they went to the doctor, and they were there for 3 months, and she decided that she needed to get to, her husband, Johann, had come back to New York through Ellis Island and came to Oklahoma, and they were in Oklahoma all this time waiting for her to come. So she decided that she needed to go ahead and come, and she left Rudolph in Germany with a nurse that she had gotten acquainted with. and she came on to America. And so Dad stayed in Germany, and every day he was supposed to go to the doctor. And he remembers getting him dressed to go to the doctor, and he went out and played in the street with the little German kids. But he didn't go to the doctor every day. So anyway, he did finally. The doctor cleared him to immigrate to America. Back in those days, now they were legal immigrants. They weren't illegal, because a lot of people were coming to the United States about that time. And they came through Ellis Island, most of them. And anyway, Dad stayed in Germany for about 14 months before the doctor cleared him to come to America. So he got on a ship. And this is from my mother's journal. And you have to know my mother before you know how this is written. It's just like she talked. And she said, so they put him on a ship and he sailed off all alone with all strangers. But Rudolph remembers well the captain and the stewards and everybody else being so good to him. He had him a big time. When they arrived in New York, they would not let him off because of his eyes. So they took him back to Germany, the same gang on the same ship. They put him on a different ship and sent him by way of Galveston, Texas. His Uncle Mike came there in time after him as they were fixing to take him back with them the next day. So by now he was 7 years old and had crossed the ocean alone 3 times. Can you imagine your 5-year-old going across the ocean? I can't. And Dad's uncle took him to Shattuck, where he was reunited with Molly and his adopted parents. He attended school through the 3rd grade, and then the bad health of his granddad, or Johann, forced him to start working full-time to help feed the family. And he finished school later, and I think we have a picture of that. That he went to German school, and he was confirmed in the Lutheran church when he was 15. And the littlest man on there is my dad, the littlest, the shortest. Yeah, 3rd from the left. And that's his confirmation certificate, and it's in German, so don't worry if you can't read it. I can't either, so anyway. And that's his naturalization papers. He was 41 when he became a citizen, and mainly because my brother was in the Navy, and he wanted Dad to get his citizenship papers. And so I remember, I was telling Carolyn, I remember when we drove to town, Mother would say a state, and then Daddy would have to tell her the capital, because they had to learn a lot of stuff to become a citizen. And I guess I learned them too, but I forgot what they were now. Anyway, this is my dad when he was 41. And anyway, that was... My dad's uncle, Mike, that met him at the ship, heard about the Ray community and that it was a good German Lutheran community. He bought a half section of land in Ray and moved his cattle and everything he owned there. My dad and grandmother Renner came with him. And my dad rode his pony to the Lutheran church a lot of times, and he told me, those slinker girls were so pretty. I think that was a calling card for him to go to church. Anyway, as he got older, he worked on the Jersey Ranch and on the Escovada Ranch, which was the headquarters for the XIT Ranch. And all y'all know that the XIT was 10 counties in Texas, and they were big, and they built the Texas Capitol and traded the syndicate built the Texas Capitol. And then they traded it for the XIT. So that's how our Texas Capitol was built, and I thought that was interesting. And my dad, while he was, Bovina was quite a cattle shipping center in the old days. It was one of the biggest that there was around. And in 1918, they had a horrible snowstorm, and many cattle died because they couldn't take care of them. They didn't have enough to feed them, and they couldn't get through the snow to get to the cattle. And so a lot of cattle died during that time. And the cowboys couldn't get overshoes, and they'd wrap gunny sacks around their feet to keep them from freezing. And so that was really hard on them. My dad got the flu, and when he was able, he sold his pony and saddle and went to back to Oklahoma and to see his mother, his sister, and her husband. And he worked for farmers there and got a job with my mother's dad, and that's when they met. He was working for mother's dad in Oklahoma when they met. And anyway, that was the beginning of their story together. And Dad, they married in October of 1926 and 21, and then they moved to Texas in 26. And so next year our farm will be 100 years old in the same family. And the Dale Hart, I think, did 100-year, and if it's in the family for 100 years, you can have a marker or something put up. And I told my kids, if I'm not here, do that. That sounds pretty nice. Anyway, faith has always been an important part of my family's life. In Russia, my family was mostly Lutheran, but they they became Baptist. And then they were persecuted by the Lutherans. And my it was mother's granddad was in the village jail because probably he was real outspoken, and probably somebody said something to him and he didn't like it, and so they put him in jail. Well, what they got to eat was bread and water when you're in jail. That's all. And his wife was she was thinking about it. And she baked a loaf of bread and put a homemade sausage in it. So she took it to the jail, and the jailer said, "Yeah, that's good." And so he got to eat sausage and bread that day and water instead of just bread and water. But anyway, when I was little, my mother came to this church. There was a church at Hub, and one Sunday it was Baptist, and one Sunday it was Methodist. And but anyway, this church started in 1914, and anyway, when I was about probably as long as I can remember, came to this church, and I remember we had a church set right about where this fellowship hall is, and there was a basement under it, and we had Sunday school classrooms in it. And I remember it had a musty smell, and I remember sticking my nose in my Bible because it smelled bad. And that's silly. Anyway, then we built the new auditorium, which isn't new anymore, but when we got married, it was 2 years old. We got married in 1953, and so we celebrated our 72nd wedding anniversary this May. And anyway, it was brand new when we got married anyway. And I wanted to share a little bit about my life, if you don't mind. I have something here that our church used to do. It's from the beginner department to the primary department. And this was from 1940, and this is my promotion certificate. And it was signed by our preacher, Joe Wilson, and he was here from 1939 to 43, something like that. And my Sunday school teacher was Mrs. Ford, and G.B. Buskey, who is Pete Buskey, as y'all remember, he signed it. He was our Sunday school superintendent. And then we always, every quarter we got a little leaflet, and it had a Bible story. And our parents were supposed to read it to us. We couldn't read, but anyway, this one is from 1940, and I have one here from 1939. And my mother had these things and kept them, and I didn't even know it until she was gone. But anyway, I really appreciate her doing that now. And some of these things are very, very, very old. 39, Peter's boat, and it tells about Jesus and his fisherman friends, and then Micah's good news, and this was April of 1940, so there's some of them that are really old. And anyway, I grew up in this church, so it's been quite a blessing to me. I've had such good Sunday school teachers and good friends that have, I think, made all the difference. And when I was a teenager, my brother married a girl that was a Christian, and she told me, explained the plan of salvation to me, and I was really shy, so I thought about it a lot, but I didn't do anything about it. And then one night, 3 of my close friends and I had a slumber party. That we used to call them slumber parties. What do they call them now? Something different. Anyway, we had a prayer meeting. Ended up being a prayer meeting instead of a slumber party, because we all realized our need for the Savior, for our Savior. And the next Sunday, my friend came forward with her cousin, and they made a profession of faith. And she wanted me to go with her. And I said, no, this is something I have to do all by myself. And so I wouldn't go with her. And so the next, probably a few Sundays after that, I went forward and made my own profession of faith. But I want it to be something that I did. And then between my junior and senior year, I went to a retreat, and it was really a neat place, a Christian camp, and the preacher talked about making Jesus the Lord of our life, not number 2 or 3, but number 1 in our life, to make him more important than anything that we did. And I made a rededication of my life and committed myself to be that person that would make the Lord number 1 in my life. And you know, I've failed so many times, but the Lord has never failed me, so I can testify that that's true. And that year in basketball, I was a senior. That was between my junior and senior year. And I played basketball, and my coach would let us pray before a game. And so we'd all gather around and pray. And we, on the bus, when we'd go to the games, we'd sing Onward Christian Soldiers and all a lot of songs that we sing in church. And we won district that year, but more than that, we learned that when we honor the Lord, He is with us. And I think that was the biggest thing that we learned, that we made Him more important than anything that we tried, and we honored Him. And after high school, I married my high school sweetheart, and I remember, y'all remember going to Vaughan, New Mexico. One time we had a mission there, and we had a vacation Bible school, and at night we had church service. And Linda remembers. Anyway, coming home from our honeymoon, we stopped in Vaughan, New Mexico, and went to church, in that little church. And it was Sunday morning, and there was a lot of tourists in the streets. You know, people just didn't go to church, and that just broke Joyce's heart, because he said, you know, what are all these people doing? Why aren't they in church? And anyway, we've determined to be in church when we had a chance. And so I think that's the secret of our long married life and our dedication to the Lord. But I just want to share with you that it's important to have a quiet time, to read your Bible and pray, and to always put the Lord first, and don't put him after everything else. You know, that's just the most important thing. And I want you to know that I think that it'll make a difference in your life, and you may even get to be as old as I am. Anyway, but I just thank Carolyn for helping me. She's been a big help, and for Debbie for asking me to do this. And I hope that you've learned something from it. I learned a lot about my family, I think. Anyway, thank y'all for coming.
I'm sorry you didn't tell her about what your mother did.